Hi friends, it is your friendly neighborhood acupuncturist extraordinaire, Dr. Barbie Wasson with River Point Family Acupuncture, and this is River Point's podcast where we get to the point on all things acupuncture, health, and vitality in the River Valley. Today, we begin something new that I am so excited to share. This is the first episode in a series I'm calling Anatomy of Trust, and the goal of this series is simple. Most people were never really taught how their bodies work, at least not in a memorable or applicable way. They don't know how their organs communicate with each other, how they adapt to stress, how they shift during exercise, change during sleep, or why certain symptoms tend to show up in packs, and why that's really just clues on what your body needs next. So in this series, we're going to walk through the body system by system, organ by organ, and process by process. We will be looking at two perspectives, modern physiology, and of course, the Chinese medical perspective. I want to walk you through real life patterns I see every day in clinic, and by the end of it, you should walk away with something pretty important. That's my hope anyway, that you will walk away with trust in your body again, trust in its messaging, trust you know how to respond, and trust in its ability to heal. Because when you understand why your body does what it does, your symptoms stop feeling random and they start making sense. And when things make sense, you make better, more informed, and more effective decisions about your health. So if this is the first episode in a series about the body, the obvious question is, where do we start? And to me, the answer was simple. We start with the master system that seems to run everything else, the nervous system. Your nervous system is actually just a regulation system, and it coordinates the rest of the body. It determines where blood flows, controls heart rate, influences digestion, shapes hormone release, directs immune activity, and even changes how your brain interprets the world around you. In other words, your nervous system seems to run the show. And this is why in clinic, when I hear things like I'm wired but tired, anxious and foggy at the same time, and my digestion falls apart when I'm stressed. Also, I'm tired all day and can't sleep at night. I don't immediately think about one isolated organ. I think about regulation of the whole system. Because the nervous system sits at the top of the hierarchy, if it becomes dysregulated, everything below starts to wobble. So let's talk about how this system works. You actually have the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system, and today we're focused on the autonomic nervous system, which has two major branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic system prepares you for action. This is the classic fight or flight response. Your heart rate increases, blood pressure rises, glucose releases into the bloodstream, and blood flow shifts away from your internal organs and towards your muscle. In essence, you're pretty much just preparing to move and act. The parasympathetic system does the opposite. This is your rest and digest. Heart rate slows, digestion increases, nutrient absorption improves, tissues repair and rebuild. One state mobilizes you and the other restores you. You absolutely need both states, and you can't live in one state forever. Stress itself isn't the problem. Short bursts of stress actually improve your performance. Exercise, public speaking, a challenging project at work are all stress. Your body responds, you perform, then in a perfect world, you return to baseline. That is a healthy cycle. The problem appears when the mobilization state becomes chronic and the restoration state becomes all too rare. To understand that, we need to talk about the stress response. When your brain perceives a threat, real or imagined, a very specific cascade begins. The amygdala activates, that signal moves to the hypothalamus communicates to the pituitary gland, the pituitary signals the adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands release adrenaline and cortisol. This is a well-known pathway known as the HPA axis. Adrenaline acts quickly, it sharpens attention, raises heart rate, and it prepares the body for immediate action, while cortisol acts more slowly. It increases blood sugar availability, suppresses functions in your body considered non-essential in a survival moment, digestion slows, reproductive hormones decrease, and immune signaling shifts. In short bursts, this system saves your life. In a long stretch, it reshapes your physiology. Under chronic stress, several predictable changes begin to happen. Stomach acid production decreases, gut motility becomes erratic, the microbiome shifts, blood flow favors skeletal muscle rather than digestive organs, and sleep architecture changes, with deep sleep decreasing and cortisol rhythms flattening. Insulin sensitivity can also decline, and thyroid hormone conversion becomes less efficient. When patients hear this list, they often react with surprise because they recognize that in themselves. Chronic stress brings them digestive issues, sleep problems, blood sugar swings, hormone symptoms, fatigue, and mood changes. None of that is random, and it's definitely not a failure of your physiology. These are just coordinated adaptations. Your body believes it must stay alert, so it reallocates resources. This brings us to one of the most important observations in medicine, which is that symptoms rarely travel alone. And I'm sure you've noticed this. During stressful periods, your digestion worsens, sleep becomes lighter, your shoulders tighten, your patience runs thin, and if you're a headache person, you typically get a whole lot of them. All conveniently happening right around the same time, making you somewhat miserable. One shift in the nervous system creates a multitude of downstream effects. Blood flow changes, hormone signaling changes, inflammatory signaling changes, everything moves together. And this gets really wild to think about when you learn the nervous system has the same response to a stressful situation happening in real time, and also just when you're remembering it or recounting it. And now we can begin to understand why we stay chronically in fight or flight. So here's the thing. Treating one or two symptoms in isolation often fails, and this is why in Chinese medicine, we just don't do that. If the regulatory system stays dysregulated, old symptoms don't go away, and eventually new symptoms will appear. Now, this idea and approach might sound very modern, with holistic medicine being in vogue right now, but ancient physicians across many cultures describe the same pattern throughout time. They just use different language that seems a little bit unfamiliar to us to explain it. In Chinese medicine, we say the heart houses the Shen. The Shen relates to consciousness, emotional balance, and mental clarity. Some even call it the spirit. We also say the liver ensures smooth flow of energy or qi throughout the body. And when that flow becomes constrained, patients experience irritability, tension, headaches, digestive disturbances, and menstrual irregularity. If this sounds familiar to you, you've probably heard me call you a little livery. Some of my favorite Chinese medicine scholars wrote extensively about the liver and emotional regulation. They emphasize that channels reflect real functional relationships in the body and describe how acupuncture channels actually correspond to anatomical and fascial continuities. Modern physiology describes neural circuits and hormonal cascades. Chinese medicine describes energy dynamics and organ networks. Different language, same observation. Regulation of the system is everything. So what does this mean for your daily life? It means your daily habits are not small things. They are direct inputs into your nervous system. When you exercise, you are not only building muscle, you are improving autonomic flexibility. After exercise, parasympathetic tone increases, insulin sensitivity improves, and sleep often deepens. When you spend time outside in natural light, you reinforce circadian signaling pathways in the brain. Your internal clock resets and hormone rhythms stabilize. When you practice slow breathing, you stimulate the vagus nerve. Your heart rate slows, your parasympathetic activity increases, and the body moves towards restoration. When you sleep consistently, cortisol rhythms stabilize and inflammatory signaling improves. These are not vague wellness tips. They are real physiological interventions with real positive consequences. Understanding the mechanisms changes how you see the habit. Now, let's talk about where acupuncture fits. because of course we would talk about that. Acupuncture influences autonomic balance. Research shows that stimulating certain points shifts parasympathetic activity and alters limbic system function. Patients often report improved sleep, a calmer mood, better digestion, and reduced pain. From a modern perspective, we are influencing neural signaling and hormonal regulation. From a Chinese medicine perspective, we are restoring the smooth flow of qi and calming the shen. Either way, the goal is the same: improve communication and balance within the system. Because when the communication and balance improve, the body adapts. And when adaptation improves, symptoms improve. So here is something I want you to pay attention to this month. Notice your nervous system at work. Notice breathing patterns during a stressful moment. Notice what happens to your digestion during a tense week. And notice how deeply you sleep after a calm day compared with a chaotic one. Your nervous system constantly shapes your internal environment. And once you start seeing those patterns, you start understanding your body in a completely different way. Next month, we move on to the digestive system, which I always say is really the seat of your health. And you might be surprised how closely the digestion listens to stress signals. Anyone ever heard of the gut brain? But for now, remember this: your nervous system has a big effect on the body as a whole. And when regulation of the system improves, healing accelerates. And that is it for this week's River Points episode and this month's Anatomy of Trust. If this episode helped you understand your body a little better, share it with somebody who might benefit from that too. And if you are in the River Valley and curious about how acupuncture might help your health, schedule a visit with us at River Point Family Acupuncture. With wishes of wellness and a highly adaptable nervous system, I'm Dr. Barbie Wasson, your Chief Nervous System Shenanigans Stopper and Expert Calm Catcher.